From the moment the Big Five studios locked down production, Hollywood's golden era forged a dream factory where classic stars and daring technology reinvented film. Between the 1930s monster hits and glamorous premieres, audiences flocked to movies that set vintage cinema benchmarks, crowning legends like Bogart, Hepburn, and Grant as immortal screen royalty. Today, we expose 10 audacious romances that ripped up that era's rulebook. Actors bold enough to marry older women and script their own vintage love stories. Buckle up for scandals, surprises, and pure silver screen intrigue for all time. Roger Moore was 24 when Welsh torch singer Dorothy Squires, 12 years older and glowing from Palladium runs, swept him up in 1952. She bankrolled his Hollywood ticket, polished his poise, and paraded him past Gary Cooper and Doris Day, flipping the Star is Born tale. They wed that July in New York. Moore in rented tales, Squires in mink, sure they were writing a golden age dream. For a while it dazzled. MGM signed him. She topped charts with I'm Walking Behind You. But as his films soared and her records slipped, fissures spread. On shoots from Rome to Monte Carlo, he fell for actress Luisa Mattioli. Squires sensed betrayal when Roma letters hit her door. One night she lobbed a brick through his window and shattered every pane of his St. John's Wood flat. She sued for conjugal rights, then libel, launching lawsuits that drained her fortune until courts dubbed her vexatious in 1987. Even after Moore moved in with Mattioli, she stretched the divorce 8 grinding years, vowing to keep the name if not the man. The decree landed in 1969. Moore remarried weeks later. Squires lost homes to fire and floods but guarded his letters like classic celluloid. In 1998, cancer ended her life penniless in a fan's spare room. Moore, now a global action star, had quietly paid her hospital bills. His 2017 farewell still carried her coaching in that famous eyebrow, proof that behind immortal movie icons stands an older woman who lit the first spotlight. Bette Davis was already a thunderbolt of Hollywood's golden era when she collided with William Grant Sherry in 1945. She was 37, an Academy Award-winning titan whose fierce stare blazed across every classic marquee. He was 31, a former Marine-turned-painter-masseur who, legend insists, had never seen one of her movies. Davis was enchanted by that indifference. After a whirlwind courtship, they married on November 30th, 1945, in a tiny Beverly Hills ceremony, sheathed in mink rather than studio sparkle. Friends muttered that the 6-year gap felt wider. She belonged to the indestructible machinery of vintage cinema, while he still mixed his own oils on a rented patio. Their honeymoon unfolded on her home set. In between takes on deception, she coached Sherry through the strange etiquette of backlot lunches while he massaged her shoulders between lighting resets. Yet off camera, the union cracked fast. Davis longed to play house. Sherry found himself relegated to house husband as she filmed one prestige film after another. When daughter Barbara, B.D., arrived in 1947, Davis spoke of retiring, but Warner Brothers dangled Winter Meeting and Beyond the Forest, and the siren call of cinema proved louder than domesticity. Sherry bristled at red carpet whispers that he was simply Mr. Bette Davis. Arguments flared over her grueling schedules, his dwindling art sales, and the entourage swirling around their rented West Hollywood bungalow. By 1949, even the tabloids, seasoned veterans of studio drama, sensed disaster. Columnists described slammed doors and shattered crockery echoing down Coldwater Canyon. Davis, in public, kept the patented sardonic grin. In private, she confided to friends that Sherry's temper was harder to tame than any director. The final blow came when she won the role of Margot Channing in All About Eve, a comeback masterpiece he called Another 1,000 Miles Between Us. Production wrapped on the Fox lot in June 1950. Divorce papers were filed 2 weeks later. That July, Davis married her co-star Gary Merrill, proof that in Hollywood endings roll straight into sequels. Sherry faded to coastal galleries in quiet anonymity, while Davis marched on as an emblem of unbreakable stardom. Their brief, combustible marriage stands as a reminder that in the age of studio gods, even a modest 6-year reversal of tradition could ignite a drama worthy of the silver screen. Lucille Ball strutted onto the RKO lot in 1940 with classic screwball timing, but her real plot twist waited behind the bongos of Cuban band leader Desi Arnaz. They met while shooting the film version of Too Many Girls, and critics later joked it should have been titled Too Little Time, because 6 months later the pair eloped to Greenwich, Connecticut at 5 a.m. No studio chaperone, no press, just a borrowed ring and a bottle of scotch. The bride was 28, the groom 22. An eyebrow-raising gap in 1940s Hollywood, where older actresses were expected to fade quietly behind fresher faces. From that impulsive dawn, they rewrote the rulebook of vintage romance and, soon, television itself. When CBS balked at casting a Cuban husband opposite a freckled redhead, Ball refused to sign without Arnaz, betting their chemistry would leap through cathode tubes. The gamble birthed I Love Lucy on 15 October 1951, drawing 60% of America's TVs to one channel and cementing their status as royalty of small-screen cinema. Arnaz masterminded the multi-camera setup and pioneered the concept of syndication, turning reruns into pure gold and making Desilu the studio that later greenlit Star Trek and Mission Impossible. Yet behind the laughter, trouble brewed stronger than Ricky Ricardo's nightclub rum. Arnaz's touring schedules, late-night gambling, and well-documented affairs gnawed at the marriage. Confidential magazines splashed scandals that Ball gamely parried with jokes on set. She filed for divorce once in 1944, withdrew it, then finally ended the 20-year union on the 1st of May 1960, the day after wrapping the Lucy-Desi Comedy Hour. Still, the love never fully faded. When Arnaz battled cancer in 1986, Ball phoned nightly. Their final conversation, falling 2 days before his death, ended with the same words they'd traded in every episode tag, "I love you." She lived 3 more years, forever lauded as the red-headed queen who proved a woman could run a studio during Hollywood's golden era. Today, television historians credit a 6-year age gap and a fearless older bride for reshaping modern movies and preserving the legacy of classic situation comedy. Joan Collins, the final glittering survivor of Hollywood's golden era, met her future husband Percy Gibson in 2000 while touring with the stage play Love Letters, where he served as company manager and producer. She was 67, already an icon from classic 1980s TV drama Dynasty. He was 36, a tall Peruvian-Scottish theater impresario with an easy laugh and zero fear of legends. Their friendship ripened on the road, shared jokes over late-night room service, and whispered critiques of regional audiences. Yet Collins, then 4 divorces deep, insisted she had retired from romance. Gibson thought otherwise, courting her with handwritten notes and rare edition novels instead of studio diamonds, a gesture she later called a script no movie's writer could improve. On 17th February 2002, the couple married at Claridge's Hotel in London beneath chandeliers once swung by 1930s princes, sealing a 32-year age gap that tabloids declared impossible. Collins quipped to reporters that she could wear him out, flipping every vintage stereotype of the older man watch her younger starlet. 2 decades later, the pair glide across red carpets, Vanity Fair's Oscar Gala, Royal Charity Galas, West End openings, moving with the synced confidence of a double act honed by thousands of flashbulbs. At home, they switch seamlessly between producing new theater projects and screening dusty film reels. Collins favors 1940s melodramas. Gibson leans toward 1950s Technicolor epics. When asked about longevity, she credits mutual curiosity and an ironclad rule: never spend more than a fortnight apart, a lesson she learned watching marriages implode on cinema sets half a century ago. Friends note the marriage outlasted every previous Collins union, making Gibson not only her 5th husband but her longest love story. Today, at 91, she still dazzles crowds in sequined gowns while he hovers, ready with a tailored overcoat and wry aside, as if they were co-stars in one continuous classic picture nobody wants to fade to black. Joan Perry was the kind of radiant ingenue who lit up vintage studio publicity stills long before she became the platinum blonde widow of Columbia mogul Harry Cohn. By 1968, she was 57, worth millions from Cohn's estate, and circulating through the most powerful drawing rooms in Hollywood. Enter Lawrence Harvey, 40, and riding the heat of Room at the Top, a brooding export the tabloids called a career climber with a taste for risk. They met at a charity gala where Harvey's clipped wit matched Perry's steel. Within months, he proposed, setting off whispers that the actor was leveraging an 11-year age gap and her fortune for a faster lane into classic cinema legend. Their October wedding at the Beverly Hills Hotel felt like a throwback to the golden era. Top stars, white orchids, and flashbulbs ricocheting off satin as the couple pledged eternal devotion beneath a four-tier cake taller than Perry herself. She traded the title Mrs. Cone for Lady Harvey, while he gained instant entree to country estates and Palm Springs golf foursomes once closed to Lithuanian up-and-comers. Yet Harvey's hunger never cooled. On European location shoots, he courted fashion model Pauline Stone, fathering a daughter while still publicly framed as Perry's dutiful husband. Perry, seasoned by studio intrigue, hired detectives and froze joint accounts, but headlines soon spun faster than any of her 1940s movies. The showdown arrived in 1972 Los Angeles courtrooms, thick with perfume and schadenfreude. Perry cited emotional cruelty. He countered with accusations of suffocating control. California judges finalized the split on Valentine's Day. Cruel symmetry for a romance once sold as a fairy tale revival of vintage glamour. Perry retreated to Montecito, hosting discreet bridge nights under portraits from her classic film days until her death in 1996. Harvey spiraled through scripts and scandals, dying at 45, proof that in cinema history the brightest meteors often leave the deepest scorch marks on those who love them. Julianne Moore met 26-year-old writer-director Bart Freundlich on the indie set of The Myth of Fingerprints in 1996. She was 35 and already reshaping Hollywood. The 9-year age gap mattered less than the gap in resume, but their bond deepened over vintage movie marathons and cheap Brooklyn takeout. Moore concealed first-trimester nausea during her classic cult turn in The Big Lebowski, carrying their son, Caleb. By the time daughter Liv arrived in 2002, family rhythm was set. If mom flew abroad for a film, dad handled lunches and bedtime stories. Public view stayed modest. Friends recall them doing school drop-offs without entourages, focusing on the kids before cameras. Marriage waited until August 2003, a townhouse ceremony so private tabloids missed it. They celebrated with pizza before Moore shot another prestige picture, and Freundlich wrote, "Trust the Man," a rom-com about messy love, clearly riffing on their own spats. Liv later joined them on the remake of After the Wedding, turning set life into a full family affair. Moore credits daily laughter and a strict 2-week travel rule for their longevity, insisting both partners must truly want the marriage. Freundlich says her fearless genre leaps, from vintage dramas to daring thrillers, shape his writing. At a Vogue screening cast, mates noted their shorthand, saying the pair glided through press lines like seasoned classic cinema leads. Nearly 3 decades in, matching outfit selfies show a duo that fuses indie grit with golden-era polish, proving classic romance can thrive amid today's movies and still draw envy from younger stars. 39-year-old Juliet Mills stepped onto a Florida stage in 1980 to rehearse The Elephant Man, bringing the pedigree of a family that helped bridge Britain and Hollywood in the golden era of talkies, her name etched into classic cinema history. Opposite her stood 21-year-old Maxwell Caulfield, a Derbyshire drifter chasing stardom after nights in cheap motels and daytime cattle calls. The 18-year gap vanished on first sight. Mills later said she must have known Maxwell in another life, crediting reincarnation for their instant bond. Weeks later, he arranged a sunrise wedding on a Pacific bluff, swapping studio flash for seabirds and salt air. Skeptics sneered that the vows would crumble when Caulfield landed a breakout, yet after Grease 2 vaulted him into pop trivia, the marriage only strengthened. Mills, beloved from Nanny and the Professor, coached him on-set etiquette, recalling lessons learned across decades of movies that shifted from monochrome reels to Technicolor dreams. Now, 40-plus years on, they garden in Ojai, screen dusty vintage DVDs, and laugh at headlines predicting doom. She still guest stars on Grey's Anatomy. He tours UK stages and soaps, proving love can outlast fickle film seasons. Their story, older heroine, younger heartthrob, zero scandal, plays like a lost classic that refuses to dim, reminding us that in cinema sometimes the boldest twist is simply staying together. Humphrey Bogart's first walk down the aisle lasted a blink, yet it foreshadowed the storms that would follow him through Hollywood's golden era. On May 20th, 1926, the 26-year-old actor married stage luminary Helen Menken at New York's Gramercy Park Hotel, a venue dripping with vintage glamour. Menken, already a Broadway sensation famed for daring roles, courted scandal when police arrested her for the lesbian-themed play The Captive just months before the vows. Bogart, still hustling for roles in classic cinema, quickly found himself eclipsed by his wife's marquee. Their honeymoon dissolved into clashing schedules. She rehearsed late. He brooded in Manhattan speakeasies, and arguments erupted like orchestral cues from silent movies. Menken later testified he stumbled home drunk and treated auditions as more sacred than affection. Broadway insiders muttered that Mr. White Pants Willie, Bogart's nickname from lightweight juvenile parts, couldn't endure living in his wife's shadow. Barely 18 months later, on the 18th of November 1927, she filed for divorce citing cruelty and neglect, winning freedom in a single-day hearing that barely dented the papers. For Bogart, the breakup proved catalytic. He left New York's footlights for West Coast film lots, where Warner Brothers Lighting would recast him as the hard-boiled hero of classic titles like Casablanca. Menken, meanwhile, chaired the American Theater Wing during World War II and received a special Tony in 1966, affirming her enduring stage legacy. Their combustible union may read as a forgotten footnote, yet it shows how even a 2-year age gap can spark divergent legends, one ruling Broadway, the other immortal on silver screens, adding another crackling chapter to the lore of cinema history. Mary Pickford was already the undisputed America's sweetheart, a founding titan of Hollywood's golden era, when a fresh-faced bandleader named Charles "Buddy" Rogers walked onto the set of the silent classic My Best Girl in 1927. She was 34 and weary from the hard glare of fame. He was 23, brimming with easy charm. The flirtation blossomed into whispered dinners and backstage jokes, all while cameras rolled. There was one colossal obstacle: Pickford's fairy tale marriage to Douglas Fairbanks, the first couple of vintage movies. By the early 1930s, the kingdom of Pickfair felt cold. Fairbanks roamed abroad, and gossip writers smelled decay. Rogers stayed close, sending letters stuffed with hope. When Pickford secured a quiet Reno divorce in 1936, she met reporters with a calm smile and stepped straight into Buddy's waiting convertible. On a June morning in 1937, they hosted an intimate garden wedding, exchanging vows beneath climbing roses instead of studio spotlights. Insiders scoffed that she, at 44, had chosen a man 11 years younger, a reversal of Golden Age tradition. Rogers shrugged, calling their bond "the only script I need." Together, they adopted 2 children and turned Pickfair into a playground of music, laughter, and homegrown 16mm film reels friends begged to watch. Pickford's on-screen reign faded as talkies surged, but Rogers guided her gracefully into producing, charity, and the preservation of silent cinema heritage. When she withdrew from public life, he remained the steadfast host of their vintage estate, reading her fan letters aloud to keep the applause alive. Their marriage endured 42 years, a quiet epic proving that in Hollywood, sometimes the boldest romance is the one that survives long after the cinema lights dim. Clark Gable has been regarded as the alpha male of Hollywood's golden era, yet the first person to sculpt that swagger was Josephine Dillon, a 41-year-old stage director who saw raw potential in a penniless 23-year-old nicknamed Billy. Gable's obsession began at 17 after seeing the vintage play Bird of Paradise, a moment that pushed him toward the stage instead of the oil fields. Dillon financed new teeth, restyled his hair, drilled posture, and even lowered his pitch so the kid would sound like a future classic cinema idol. The pair moved to Los Angeles in 1924, launched the Dillon Stock Company, and, fearing gossip, married on the 13th of December. He claimed 24 on the license. She 34, masking an 18-year gap that ignited studio whispering. Under her coaching, he dropped Billy, adopted the name Clark, and hustled for silent film walk-ons while she paid the rent and pulled strings. Yet the union was all business. At their wedding party, Gable danced with wealthy blondes while Dillon seethed alone, foreshadowing heartache. As his auditions grew, so did embarrassment. Gable asked Dillon to stop attending performances and vanished for days with younger co-stars. By 1929, he wanted out, and Dillon, exhausted, filed for legal separation. The divorce finalized 1 April 1930. Just 2 days later, the rising star married Texas socialite Rhea Langham, proving that in movies as in life, connections could trump loyalty. Dylan quietly returned to coaching, eking by in a converted barn while her protege conquered Hollywood box offices with classic hits that defined vintage film culture. She never retaliated, insisting she still loved him, an irony the studios buried once Gable became the king. So every time that famous grin flickers across a silver screen, remember the older woman who engineered it and brace yourself, because the next romance show's ambition burns even hotter when two careers collide.